pressing a trigger, aiming the gun, all of that stuff I can practice in dry fire. And so those skills should be pretty much getting worked on off the range. At the range, though, I want to confirm that I'm hitting what I was meaning to hit and that I'm learning how to control that recoil.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to this installment of the Vortex Nation podcast. We're calling So You Bought a Pistol, Now What? And I feel like there's a lot of folks in this situation, whether you're just a new gun owner or you've owned firearms in the past, but you have your first pistol. Potentially you are a hunter, and as the prevalence of grizzlies kind of increases across the landscape, you're thinking twice about heading afield bow hunting without a little backup piece connected to your person, in case you have to defend yourself in that regard. So I got Jim to my right. Just a pleasure, Jim. Always great having you here.
Thank you.
And Brennan Brennick from Vortex Edge. Now, Brennan, I have to say, I was when I first saw your name, I was like, wait a minute, because it's very similar to like what I would pronounce Brennicky, like the Brennicky slugs
exactly
and
the same.
ammunition. I think there might be one letter difference.
Okay. Is there? I don't know.
Maybe not.
I don't know.
Anyway, I've always pronounced it
this.
Brennicky.
Right.
Now there's an E on the end
There
of
is.
your name, but
There
it's
is.
Brennick.
It is Brennick. Yes.
Confirmed.
It's a very German name because I'm very German.
As those of you watching on YouTube can tell.
No, I'm not German. I have a German family, though. So,
Really?
yeah.
Very cool.
I was adopted from Korea.
Oh, no way. Awesome.
So I am Korean, but I do have a German name.
That's pretty
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
I like it.
Pretty cool.
Both my girls are adopted.
That's really cool.
It's awesome, man. It's a
awesome.
beautiful world. All right.
Sometimes my brothers, when they're trying, they tell me I'm adopted.
Before we get too started, don't get too started, Jim. Threw me off there. Brennan, you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of I guess your personal pistol journey, because it's actually super interesting.
Sure. Yeah. So, like many Americans, I grew up just family-owned guns, right? And mostly for hunting, 22 bolt actions, shotguns. My dad had like a little 22 pistol. Never had like a defensive style handgun. So no like Glocks or anything, or M&Ps or anything like that, right? So it was essentially shotguns and 22s.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was cool. I always thought guns were cool. But one thing that I learned very early on was that pistols had this thing where they reciprocated, and I just thought that they would just cut your hand up, like to no end. Like you couldn't shoot it without just getting sliced wide open. So I thought that was super dumb, and I didn't ever really want to shoot a pistol because of that. I was like, I'll stick to rifles. And that was kind of this weird thing that I carried with me kind of like all the way up until like college. I was like, handguns are kind of like weird and scary, and I'm not really sure that I ever want to shoot them because it seems kind of dangerous. So then someone actually showed me how to shoot a pistol. They showed me how to grip it correctly and shoot it, and I was like, wow, that's really fun. So at that point, I want to say I was 22. And I had thought about getting my concealed carry when I was like 21, just like right off the bat, but I was still kind of hesitant. So I think I was 22 or 23, and someone showed me how to shoot a pistol. I was like, hey, that's not scary at all. So at that point, I immediately signed up for my CWP and bought my first handgun and just started training like crazy with it. So that was kind of my journey, and that was not all that long ago for me, just a few years ago. But that was kind of just my entry into the world of pistols. I wanted to get into it because I thought it was pretty cool that I could carry a gun to defend myself. Mm-hmm. Obviously, saw a lot of reasons that you might want to do that with a lot of stuff that's going on in the world. And as soon as I got it, I realized how bad I was with it, and so I realized that there was a lot to learn. And so that just kind of fueled me, because I figured if I'm going to carry it, man, I should probably be pretty good with it.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think your story with that is really cool, because a lot of people will see they go through the pros and cons or whatever of owning a pistol, which I can't think of any cons aside from like you got to buy it, which could be expensive. But they see all the pros of owning a pistol. They know that they want to own one at a time like this, which so many people have been buying pistols more than ever lately. And a lot of people, they finally will go into the store or they'll do whatever they need to do to they finally acquire the pistol, and then they're sort of like, whew, man, all right, well, check that one off the list. Now I'm done.
Well, and that actually is like a giant hurdle at the same time. So you can see where, that feeling of like, okay, we did it, everybody.
Right. And I think, Brennan, what you explained to me before was that, you got a pistol and you very quickly realized, like, okay, if I'm actually going to use this for defensive purposes, which many people are getting a pistol for, in addition to just recreational, competition, that sort of thing. But if I'm going to use it for defensive purposes, like, it's not enough just to physically own it and, like, even just have it on me.
Right.
I actually should know the ins and outs, everything about how to use this and how to use it, like, just to maximum effectiveness, whatever that word is.
Yeah.
And so you've put a lot of time. I mean, it's your thing. It's now your full-time job. You put a ton of time into that.
I think I'll add on to that though, Jim. Like, I think a lot of people can, identify or relate to Brennan. Like, I mean, it's almost like you had a level of hesitance, and then you finally, like, kind of took that step, shot a pistol, said, "Wait a minute, these are very cool, very useful," but actually, like you said, now I've got a lot to learn, and I think it's actually inspiring as well because you literally went from 0 to 60. Like, I don't think I ever want one of these things, to expert status in not that much time. Now, that took a lot of work. That's not going to be like, hey, everybody, be an expert in 2 years, right? But it shows that it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think a lot of that does definitely come down to your motivation for it. And so I felt like I had a really good motivation because I knew I'd made the decision that I wanted to carry the pistol, right? I wanted to carry it every day. And the idea of carrying that pistol 24/7, well, not 24/7, but anytime I was out in public carrying it, that really fueled that desire. Was like, well, if I'm really going to do that, then I really have to be able to be competent for any situation that I would encounter when I'm out in the public. And so that was kind of the driving force. And then along my journey of starting to figure out how to shoot, I realized there was this whole competitive world where people were just trying to see exactly how good they can be with a gun. USPSA, 3-gun, 2-gun, all of those competitions. I was like, wow, there's a lot to unpack, more than just this defensive kind of mindset, 3 to 7 yards type thing. And so I thought that was pretty cool, and that also fueled it, made me a better shooter, which in turn makes me a better concealed carrier, concerned citizen, responsible citizen, that type of thing.
Mark, so can I, for the sake of this podcast, can I throw out like an assumption that we'll sort of make in regards to this? Can I throw out the assumption being that this is geared towards the person out there who has purchased a handgun, probably relatively recently, with the idea in mind, some sort of defensive motive in mind, right? So you see, the world seems a tad crazier than ever, so I feel like I should have some means to protect myself. The pistol, it seems to be that's the way most of the world, if you can look at numbers and it proves this, gravitates towards buying a pistol of some sort. Can we make that assumption a little bit here?
I would say that's safe.
I'd say
definitely.
That's the majority. And so with that, I think we can even rewind a little bit. And I think when you buy that pistol, in the whole title of this, I bought a pistol, now what? I think some people buy a pistol and they don't necessarily even know how it could even be employed defensively.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you bought a pistol and you knew you wanted to concealed carry it. You knew you wanted to have it on you when you were out in public. I think some people don't even realize how it is that they want to even carry it. Or,
Sure.
I bought this pistol, and it's like it's there, and it's like, okay, all of a sudden this is mine, and it's like, do I keep this in my house? Do I carry this? What do I do with it? Like, I have a means to defend myself, but now
Yeah.
We kind of have to even almost answer that. Like, should people start considering, like, should they concealed carry it? Or should they mostly at first just kind of keep it as a nightstand type thing for home defense? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, and I do see this with new gun owners, they're pretty hesitant to carry it, right? They don't want to just holster up, stick it in their pants, and walk around with it.
Sure.
And I think a lot of that comes down to familiarization with your firearm, comfortable, whether or not you're comfortable with it, comfortable shooting, comfortable drawing from a holster, that type of thing, deploying it from wherever you carry that gun. So for a lot of people, they purchase that handgun that's like, hey, this is going to be my home defense gun, right? Which means that they kind of stick it in the safe or stick it by the bedside table, and now they don't have to think about it. It's just peace of mind. It exists.
Yeah.
Right? Man, probably in a situation where they really needed that, I hope they can use it, right? But without ever shooting it, without training it with it, we're not stacking the odds in our favor, right? So I think for people who are going out to buy a handgun or they just bought a handgun, they need to decide what they want to do with it, what their main purpose for it is. A handgun is great because it can serve multiple roles. So a handgun can be a home defense weapon. Mm-hmm. It can be a concealed carry weapon. It can be a gun that you just love to shoot at the range, right? It can fill all of those roles.
Right.
And so I think you need to pick a pistol that is going to match what you want it for. And also one that is fairly easy to shoot, so we can spend a lot of time on it and we can learn on it. And I think that's a good starting point.
For sure. Now, what do you recommend that somebody does first? Like, let's say you just bought a pistol just by itself, right?
Sure.
So, like, you buy a Glock, you buy an M&P, you open it up, comes with a couple of mags, whatever. I mean, is there some accessories you should be buying first? You know, you got to be buying ammunition. There's some other things that have to go along with it before you can even go about using it. What should people be doing there?
Definitely. So the number one thing for me is I need to get a holster for it, right? Because that's going to kind of be my additional layer of safety, even if I'm not planning on carrying it on my body. Having a gun holstered in a hard-sided holster like Kydex or a similar material is going to cover the trigger guard, and so when it's holstered, it's not going to be able to be fired because we can't access the trigger. That's going to be the first thing. It's also a great way to transport it, right? Don't carry it around in your gun case, right? Just stick it in a holster. That way, if the need ever arises where you do want to retain that gun on your body, you could take that holster, you could clip it onto your pants or your belt, and now we can at least just transport it around between your car, between your bags, between your house, anything like that. So the first thing for me is always just find a good holster, right? And that's going to be a layer of safety. That's how I view that.
And I know, like you said, too, I know a lot of the guys down at Vortex Edge, they really harp on, like you said, something Kydex or a hard material of some sort. You see all these ones that are, everybody's always so focused on, well, you know, you want to carry a gun, but you also want to be super comfortable. And they start making all these compromises where it's like, well, this thing does all these things and it goes in this area, and they make it harder to access, or they make it, you know, the holster can collapse much easier, so it's harder to get to the gun or put the gun back in the holster and stuff like that. A nice Kydex holster or something like that is really...
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the safety aspect of it can't be compromised at all. So a holster can't be collapsible. It can't have a penetrable material like nylon. Those things are non-negotiables. So that has to be in place. And then after that, we can figure out how to make that safe holster the most comfortable it can be, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different things that play into that. We can maybe get into that on another episode, but first of all is just that safety aspect.
Sure.
In addition to a holster, I think for a lot of people, one thing you're going to want to consider is extra magazines. So most guns come with maybe 1 to 3 magazines, if we're being generous, right? Generally, it's 2. Magazines are actually they don't last forever, right? They wear out, and eventually you do have to replace them. If you're buying something like a Glock mags are pretty inexpensive. They're maybe $25 or something. So buy up a couple more of those. My rule of thumb for any pistol that I own is I want to have at least 6 to 10 mags that work for that gun. Okay, and that way I can leave some loaded up right? I can have some empty for dry fire. I can have some in my range bag. I can have some kind of by my bedstand or in my vehicle, and that way I have mags kind of everywhere. If your gun's empty and you don't have a magazine with ammunition in it, kind of doesn't do you much good as far as a defensive weapon, right?
That could be a problem. But yeah, I mean that's a really good tip though. It's like you have this suite of mags, and some are your practice mags, so you're loading those up with maybe ammunition that's geared more towards practicing, and then defensive mags that you have maybe loaded with a different cartridge, and then empty ones for dry fire, so you can get that practice in off time or at home or wherever.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
What about, I did want to say, we're talking about safety paramount with the holster. What about storage options at home? Because you definitely want to be able to access that firearm if you want to, but you definitely want to keep it out of the hands of people you don't want it in the hands of, and that could be kids, other people, whatever. So what are some good options out there? I've seen some by Hornady, which are kind of like a quick access pistol safe type thing. But what, I guess, what would be your recommendations, or what do you see out there?
So for me personally, I think the best way to kind of keep the firearm safe and myself in control of it is to keep it on body. So I actually wear my pistol most of the time at home. Also, a lot of break-ins and things like that happen during the day or just when you're at home. And if your pistol is in a safe somewhere and someone breaks into your house and you need to defend yourself or your loved ones and you don't have that gun, you have to run upstairs to the bedroom and grab it. It's not really doing us a whole lot of good there. A lot of people have a gun for home defense, but they only consider that for nighttime. Like they're going to be laying in their bed and their gun is going to be within reach. They're going to grab it and jump out of bed and be the hero. That's not really the precedent we see for those types of like home invasion or home break-ins that we see. It's honestly usually during the daytime. People are usually awake, or somebody assumes that you're gone and you're not. So number one for me is if I can keep it on my body, I'll do that. Right? Or I'll keep it within arm's reach. If you have kids or something like that and that's a concern, I do recommend those bedside safes, something like that. I recommend one with just manual buttons that you can push, so there's no chance for electronic failure, just something that's really simple that you know the combination to, and you can hit that in the dark. You don't have lights lighting up or anything like that. That's a pretty good option. As far as storing handguns that maybe you're not using for a defensive situation, definitely a gun safe is the way to go.
Yeah. How about this one too? And before we get into ammo, because I know that's, you and I were just talking about that before we came up here too. But
it's on my list.
Before we get to that,
I'm going to point out that both Brennan and I have printed out paper lists of
extensive lists
stuff we want to talk about.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure the forests appreciate it. Good thing they don't listen. But anyway, how about addressing the whole analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by analysis? Dang it. Mark, I know we have that agreement. We can't edit things like that out, so I'm just going to have to live with having said that. Okay, paralysis by analysis of extra add-ons, aftermarket parts, fancy triggers, this, that, and the other thing. I think a lot of times people will get a pistol and they start jumping on the forums and everybody's, well, a Glock stock trigger is garbage. You need to get this $250 trigger. And the sights are garbage. You need to get these $80 sights. And, you need to do this and you need to do that before it's even usable, and they start worrying so much about making the gun, quote, better versus just using it. Can we address that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a real rabbit hole, right? Most of us like to tinker with stuff, right? We never leave things stock. Jimmy, you're a car guy, right? You don't buy a car and just leave it stock. You're always going to try to upgrade things, right? I'm the same way with a lot of guns. I want to try to, I want to throw in a better trigger or something like that. However, when it comes to just what we need versus what we want, I think there's an important distinction there. And so for me, for a defensive pistol, there's two main things that I'm definitely going to do to every single pistol. Okay, so one is going to be I'm going to add a red dot because red dots make shooting much easier. Okay, and so there's lots of benefits to shooting red dots. We've covered that on the podcast before. I'm always going to add a red dot. Okay,
yeah,
they're way better during low light situations, and they're I can say target focused all the time, and I'm not hunting for iron sights. It's just a lot easier. So I'm always going to add a red dot to every single pistol that I own. I'm also, in most cases for a defensive pistol, I'm going to add a weapon mounted light. Okay. So a weapon mounted light is just going to be that flashlight that attaches to the pick rail of your gun, and that way I have a light source for a nighttime or a low light environment where I need to make sure I can identify what I'm shooting at.
Yeah.
Those, for me, for like a defensive pistol, are pretty much a necessity. I'm going to put both of those on the gun. Assuming the gun is quality, that's probably all I need to do to it. Everything else I would say would be pretty optional. They can enhance the shooting experience, but they're also not going to make you a better shooter. Okay, it's gonna enhance the skills that you already have.
And the things that you've described there, now, provided you get, let's say, MOS or a core, whatever type of pistol that comes optic ready,
sure,
that's a bolt-on affair, very easy.
Yep.
And then the other one you mentioned, the weapon-mounted light, again, another bolt-on thing, very easy to get to. You're not having to drift out roll pins and replace triggers and do all this fancy, gunsmithing of your own. It's just you keep the pistol as is, you add on a couple of things, and that's pretty straightforward.
Yep, 100%. So after those two things, I think the order that I would go in is I would address perhaps I might want some more grip texture on the frame of the firearm. So maybe some stippling, some silicon carbide or something, some sort of grip tape to help hold on to the gun better. That's going to enhance my shooting experience. You don't want to go maybe too aggressive if you're going to be carrying that on body. That could be kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I usually want as much grip as I can stand to carry. That's just going to make shooting easier. Some guns do benefit from an aftermarket trigger, but that's also kind of a rabbit hole in and of itself, because you can start getting into some pretty unreliable parts when you start messing with the way the gun was designed from the factory. And
right.
So I always kind of tell people, do that at your own risk. If you put in an aftermarket trigger, make sure you shoot that a lot and can prove that it's reliable for a certain amount of rounds expended.
Right, and a better trigger will not make you a better shooter. I mean, you have to become a better shooter.
Definitely.
To become a better shooter, or to be a better shooter.
Absolutely.
Well, and I was going to ask, is there... I guess is there a benefit either way? Let's say somebody just I've got unlimited funds. I can make this pistol. I can add all the Gucciest of Gucci things, before I start using it. Let's say that was an option. Would that be better, worse, or just indifferent than taking the stock things that are, maybe not as refined, but learning on that, so then you almost can appreciate those finer things and know what's going on there? Or maybe it's just learn what you have, and then you've learned what you have, and you're good at that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did that make any sense at all?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that if money's not a prohibiting factor for you at all, and you can drop as much money as you want into this pistol from day one, I don't see any downsides to it, provided the upgrades that you make are not going to affect the reliability of the gun.
Right.
So I don't see a downside. However, I also don't think that you will really notice a difference if you're a first-time gun owner or a first-time pistol shooter between that completely Gucci'd out $2,500 Glock and your $600 Glock with a red dot on it. I don't think you're going to notice much difference.
Yeah.
I think that as you progress in your shooting abilities, that's when you start noticing kind of some of the finer nuances of triggers, or hey, when I increase the weight of my recoil rod, it affects recoil differently. I'm seeing a little bit of a different recoil pattern. Things like that. Yeah, that's going to kind of make a difference once you've reached a certain level of skill. Again, I don't see a con to it if money really isn't an option.
I'll throw out a con.
Sure.
This is something that I've learned, and you have to assess who you are as a person, and also what the gun is to you, what you're going to use it for, what it means to you. But time, if you want to have a pistol now, and you want to start learning to shoot it and get good at shooting it and have it now, take it out of the box. It will work if you get it from a reputable brand. It'll work. Throw a red dot and a light on it and just go and start learning. Because sometimes, man, when you're getting all that, I want to send my slide off to get this, that, and I want to send this off to get
custom
stippled,
shops.
I want to do it takes a lot of time, and that's time that you're not shooting and learning it,
Definitely.
And so I've learned that the hard way. Well, and a lot of times, like when it comes to the projects that I do in the garage, I do them because I enjoy tinkering on things more than I enjoy driving. But a lot of times I know that, like, dude, some guy in just a completely stock, like, Miata would come through and smoke me on a racetrack because, like, he drives way more than I do because he's not always fiddling on everything. It's things like that. Like, somebody with a completely stock polymer frame pistol can come in and smoke somebody with this fancy gun that they're always having worked on.
Definitely.
And
we actually see that a lot.
Yeah.
We see that a lot. You see that in USPSA, people will spend a ton of money on their guns, just thousands and $5,000 guns, right? And they can't get them to run. They're always having malfunctions. Things are always breaking. And you see some guy who's just learning on his Glock 19, and he comes in and he's just shredding because he has no issues with his guns.
Right.
I think
that's pretty cool.
That's super cool. I think some of it's just the individual, right? Some people have more money than time. Some people have more time than money.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair. It reminds me, too, in high school football, I remember there was this kid, and if anybody would
another
ever
one of Jim's high school football, it's constant around here.
Oh, yeah. You really pick up on a lot of stories from the bench. You have more presence of mind to actually assess what's going on. But this kid, every time he'd see somebody make, like, just a killer play in practice or something like that, I remember he'd always go and be like, dude, that was sick, man. Like, how much do you bench? And the kid would always be like, what? And I'm like, he thought that was how you get good at football.
Unrelated things.
It's like, how do you get good at football? It must be how much you bench. No, it's because I play football a lot. Like,
oof.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we talk about ammo? Because it's another thing that you got to get to shoot.
Right.
Yep.
Brennan, so you brought this up. I thought the point that you made was one that I hadn't heard somebody make before, even though it's kind of like a little bit painfully obvious in 2021, but just finding ammo.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the most common questions I actually get, like on Instagram or something like that. People ask me, hey, man, where can I find ammo? And I'm like, well, get on your phone, open your browser, type in 9mm ammo for sale, and buy some of that.
Hold on, slow down. I'm taking notes.
And I think for some reason people think you can only buy ammo at gun stores.
Like in person.
In person.
Yeah.
Like check out at the cash register and buy your box of ammo. I mean, you can buy as much ammo as you want online and have it shipped to your door. So you're not limited by going to Academy or Cabela's or your local mom and pop shop.
All great options.
All great options.
Yeah.
All great options for sure, especially if you're trying to support your local businesses. But, man, if you really need, like, the best prices probably, and you need a lot of ammo, and they're not going to limit you probably. So, man, I just get online and I shop for ammo online. So it doesn't need to go through a gun store. It'll just get shipped right to your door.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to do it. You can order in bulk too, so you can order maybe 500 or 1,000 rounds at a time, and then now you're set up to train for months at a time.
Yeah. There's a lot of there's certain circumstances where I'll prefer going in store for ammo, and then I'll prefer going online. You don't have to do all one or the other. I know when it comes to bulk training ammo, like FMJ, just regular ball ammo, whatever, the gun's going to eat whatever you feed it essentially. I'll go online to buy a bunch of that. But then when it comes to hunting rounds or something like that, where I'm going to be buying just a couple of boxes, that's where I like to go into the store because, as long as if you can check ahead and make sure they got it in stock or something, but then that way you can get it quicker. Sometimes even stuff that'll be out of stock online because everybody's just pounding the online retailers, we'll find it right there in the store, and vice versa happens too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Or maybe you're driving to the range and you want to sight in your rifle and you're out of 308 or something like that. Right. You can just stop in, grab a box of it, sight in your new scope or whatever it is, and then you're done. You can just stop on the way to the range. Right. So there's definitely a convenience factor there. But man, just for buying training ammo, and I just get online and buy it. As far as the different types of ammo, so for training, right? We're not I don't want to make this a big ammo discussion, but for training, pretty much we just use Full Metal Jacket, the cheapest stuff you can buy. 115 grain Full Metal Jacket is generally the cheapest stuff.
Out of a 9
9mm. Yeah. So using the example of 9mm,
if a person maybe hasn't got their pistol yet, maybe you're like, I'm thinking about getting a pistol, and then I'll have that now what thought. But would that be kind of your general rec? Would be a 9mm? Would be the sweet middle ground there?
Definitely. It's the most common pistol caliber in the world. So most guns are most defensive guns are set up around a 9mm caliber. It's the easiest to get. It's currently the cheapest. I would definitely go with that. Same thing for like if you get an AR, probably get it in 223 5.56. That really common round. Military uses it. Law enforcement uses it. So there's an abundance of it. It's easy to find. So with pistols, definitely 9mm. Full Metal Jacket for training. Full Metal Jacket for training. You don't need jacketed hollow points just to punch paper. Right. However, for ammo that you're going to carry, I call them defensive loads, right? I do want jacketed hollow points. So I do want something that's going to expand, and that's going to prevent over penetration, right? So if God forbid I had to shoot somebody and we're in an environment where that bullet passing through that person could hit another person who did not need to be shot, man, I sure wouldn't want that to be on me because I was just shooting round ball ammo that just punches through with no regard. So I want something that's going to expand on impact. That's always something I recommend. There's a lot of gimmicky defensive ammo out there too. You'll see stuff like Zombie Slayer 2000 ammo.
If it looks like it came out of like
a video game,
a video game,
then don't buy it. I try to stick to either Federal HST. Or Spear Gold Dot. Those are the two of the most commonly used, like law enforcement rounds. Military uses it. It's got the most amount of testing behind it. So I generally try to steer people towards Federal HST or Spear Gold Dot. It's expensive stuff. It's generally over $1 a round. So it's expensive. So I'm gonna shoot a little bit of it to make sure it works well on my gun. I'm gonna make sure I know my point of impact relationship between that ammo and my gun and my sights. And then I'm going to load up a few mags of that. I'm going to have a little back stock of that. But then my primary training ammunition is just going to be Full Metal Jacket, the cheap stuff.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
What have you noticed like different point of impact when you've been between your training ammo? So definitely something person wants to test.
Definitely. And in fact, what I do on my personal guns is I will zero my gun with my defensive ammo, and I will witness mark my adjustment screws, my elevation and windage screws. I'll witness mark those in one color for my defensive ammo. And then, depending on how much training ammo I have, I will perhaps adjust my zero to something that works differently for my training ammo, and then at the end of the day I can just adjust it back. And so I just take a little paint pen and make a mark, and I can just adjust it right back to where it needs to be for the gold dot that I carry.
That's a pretty good idea.
There's definitely a significant or can be a significant shift in point of impact depending on what ammo you're using. So I always recommend that people know exactly where that defensive ammo is going to be hitting. You'd hate to be an inch off, in some scenarios. So definitely something to be aware of.
What about like recoil impulse between like your training ammo versus maybe your defensive ammo?
Sure, that's a good question. So defensive ammo is usually loaded a little bit hotter, so there's a little bit, generally a little bit more recoil with those. I think, though, that here's the thing, I don't grip a pistol differently with my defensive ammo or my training ammo. I'm still going to grip it hard. I'm still going to try to tame that recoil as best as I can. And so if I need to use my defensive pistol, my defensive loads, nothing's going to change about how I shoot that pistol. I'm still going to grip it the same way. I'm still going to do everything the same way that I do with my training ammunition. Yes, will there be a little bit more recoil? Sure, right? I doubt most people will notice that or be thinking about that in a scenario where they might need to use that gun. It's for me, I will shoot that defensive ammo every couple of months to make sure that I'm still in tune with it. It's not something that's taking me by major surprise.
Oh, you don't get kind of lazy or something.
For sure. And but that's not. I would say that's probably not as big of a deal as some people might think it is.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I got to throw a quick plug out there too for one of our videos online, because we've talked a little bit about sighting in a red dot. You talked about putting a red dot on a pistol. Now, some people that's still a new concept. It's really becoming more and more the norm now. I mean, all the Vortex Edge instructors, everybody has a red dot on their gun. I know that's the way I'm going. It just seems to be the way.
Mm-hmm.
We have a video, the Vortex Optics YouTube channel, of how to sight in a red dot on a pistol, so you can check that out just as a reference. So, but okay, ammunition is definitely important. Do you find now people buy it in bulk, and do you find, is there like a set? How many rounds should somebody be looking at getting? Like, how many rounds should they even be thinking about shooting? Right now, we're going to maybe start getting into the whole training discussion.
Sure.
Whether that's self-training or going to a place like Vortex Edge is one of many. There are many places you can take shooting training. Vortex Edge is probably the best. Okay. Somebody probably just threw up their breakfast as they were eating it in the car.
We're actually going to take that quote and we're just going to have it like totally subliminal throughout this podcast, Jim. So when somebody gets done listening, they'll be like, Vortex Edge, that is the best.
Fight Club style, where it just keeps getting stitched in randomly and you don't even notice it. So somebody's newer to pistols, they're probably not going to be just shooting Jerry Michlik levels of ammo, right? I mean, that guy shoots just tens and tens of thousands of rounds just out of his pistol alone, probably a year. What should they be expecting to do?
So I think it depends on how much time you want to put into it, right? So if you really can only get to the range once a month, once every other month, you're probably not going to be able to do a whole lot of shooting, right? If you can get to the range fairly regularly and you're maybe supplementing that live fire practice with some quality dry fire practice to really kind of get the most out of your range sessions, I don't think you actually need to take a ton of ammo per range trip. So I actually think that you can get a lot of work done with about 100 rounds. And if it was an ideal situation where I know you're gonna spend some time dry firing, and you're also going to commit to going to the range twice a month, okay, so maybe every other week, and shoot 100 rounds, you can maybe spend an hour there. That's gonna maybe cost you about $30 in ammo, which is probably doable for most people. And you can get a lot of training value, I would say, out of about 100 to 200 rounds per month. Obviously, you can shoot a lot more than that. My first year shooting, I was shooting over 1,000 rounds a month of just my pistol, and dry firing 1 to 2 hours a day. Most people aren't going to do that, right? But like I said, if you're purposeful dry fire, especially if you get some training and can figure out how to set yourself up, you can figure out how to practice that dry fire plus that small amount of live fire on a regular basis, I think is going to really set you up pretty well.
Yeah. Another plug, check out our 10-minute talk on dry fire with Brendan. So when somebody, so the whole discussion around training and everything, it can take a lot of turns and facets. So we're just going to kind of we're here, but I'll throw out one. Shooting at the range for the purposes of actually getting better. Now, I think a lot of people, they get this pistol, they're like, okay, cool. Hey, thanks, guys. All right, I got the stuff for the pistol, I got the ammo for the pistol. Now I'm going to go to the range. This is where I'm going to become a better shooter. They get to the range, they pull it out of the case, or maybe they've got a holster for it, at this point, so whatever. But they're there on the line, they're like, all right, yeah, let's be a better shooter. Wait, what do I do now that I'm at the range? And you see people all the time who just kind of okay, they pull out the gun, they shoot the mag empty, just at a target, and then they're like, okay, throw in another mag, they shoot that mag empty, that gets old really fast, they're already bored, they don't know what they should change or do differently, and then 30 rounds in, they're kind of like, I'm just going to go home.
Yep.
The gun went bang.
Yeah.
And off we go.
And you're like, I know I'm supposed to say shooting is fun because I'm American and people will call me a communist if I don't say that. But that was actually pretty boring.
Well, and conversely, though, Jim, I think there probably are a lot of folks they're like, okay, I've got this, and that is fun. Hey, let's go to the range, let's shoot, and maybe they're not being super intentional or thinking about it or critiquing themselves. I mean, on some level, yeah, that is practice. Like you probably got more familiar with the controls, or you at least got a rep in manipulating some of the controls. You've got more familiar with the the recoil and hopefully getting your sights on target. But like without knowing what you're supposed to be looking for, it's hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think again, that's one of the main reasons to seek professional training, is because a professional trainer, any instructor who's worth his salt, is going to be able to help you learn how to practice. Okay, so the things that they teach you and the way they teach you how to practice is stuff that you can take back and work on yourself. And so I think that's the easy answer. The main things for me when I go to the range, I want to work on two things primarily. Okay, I want to work on marksmanship, so I want to work on hitting what I was trying to hit. Okay, and then the second one is going to be working on recoil control, because recoil control is not something that I can replicate in dry fire.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else I can. Okay, so pressing a trigger, aiming the gun, all of that stuff I can practice in dry fire, and so those skills should be pretty much getting worked on off the range. At the range, though, I want to confirm that I'm hitting what I was meaning to hit and that I'm learning how to control that recoil.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that I tell people to focus on first.
What's your ratio of dry fire to live fire?
Ooh. Well, before working at a range, I would say my ratio was probably 80% dry fire, 20% live fire.
Wow.
Maybe more. Actually, I would say probably more. Probably more like 90-10.
Dang.
Yeah. I was shooting maybe once or twice a month, and I was dry firing every single day.
That's awesome.
Yep.
What would you see from your dry fire to your live fire? Like, how would that translate over? Were you seeing like big benefits to that dry fire practice?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of especially if you've decided, hey, I want to conceal carry this gun, right? One of the things that a lot of people work on is how quickly can we deploy the handgun and get one shot on our target, right? Maybe at 7 yards. So maybe you're going to measure that, maybe the time. I go live, right? I load up, I holster my gun, and I go to do that draw and put one shot on target, and it was like, hey, that's just like dry fire. I'm really comfortable with that. Everything was exactly the same.
Right.
Nothing changes until I start doing multiple shots on multiple targets, or holding myself to some real high accuracy standard, maybe shooting a B8 bullseye at 25 yards, something that's pretty difficult that I want to confirm for sure in live fire. But all of the gun handling mechanics are things that I can that really just transfer straight over one-to-one from dry fire to live fire. So my draws, my reloads, any sort of manipulation that I'm going to do. There's not really any time difference. The time differences that I might see is going to come from not being able to actually account for recoil in dry fire.
Mm-hmm. What about, so like the person, let's say this person that we're talking about right now, this is their first firearm.
Okay.
They went out, they bought a pistol, they have relatively zero firearms experience.
Okay.
Could that be a good thing? Like, as far as like if they actually went and sought qualified professional training, like to have that blank slate?
Absolutely.
So they shouldn't be like super intimidated, like, man, I got this thing, but like, I've never shot a gun before.
As long as you seek out an instructor who has tailored the class around a new shooter.
Okay.
Sometimes, actually a lot of times, instructors don't want brand new shooters because they want to teach maybe some slightly more advanced applications of the fundamentals, and they're not going to spend a lot of time on just figuring out fundamentals, and especially maybe in a one-on-one setting. But if you can get a one-on-one training session with an instructor, or you can go to a beginner's shooters class where you're going to learn all those things, I think that's the best way to start. That way you're not developing any bad habits. And and you can learn, like you said, with a blank slate. Yeah.
It's so nice that way.
Oh, it's so much better.
I can't tell you how many times you see brand spanking new shooters, haven't touched a gun. They've come into one of our intro classes, and they're shooting, talking intro to pistol here in this particular case, but they're shooting X-rings, like just X-ring, 10-ring, X-ring. And you're like,
huge majority of the time, they're much better than people who say, I grew up around guns, I shoot guns all the time.
Shooting guns my whole life, and then they're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to. You've shot 10 shots, and we're gonna have to actually try and get these on paper now, for your next.
Right. And I think a lot of that comes from that whole idea of not really knowing how to train, and so they take their pistol to the range or their backyard or whatever it is, and they just shoot until the mag is dry or empty, and then they're like, okay, I guess I'll shoot another mag, and they do the same thing, and they're like, cool, and then they go home.
I guess I have nothing else to learn.
Right. Exactly. Whereas a new person is like, a lot of times they're really concerned. They're like, man, I'm thinking about carrying this pistol, but I wouldn't want to shoot somebody that I didn't mean to shoot or whatever it is, and so they're wanting to learn that stuff, and I'm like, okay, we can work with that. I can teach you how to hit what you're aiming at. And they're like, oh, that's really cool, and so they're soaking it all up versus just, oh yeah, I know how to shoot.
The other thing that I really
and then
like,
you're like, okay, cool. Not only do I need to teach you how to shoot, I need to undo what you think you know.
Yeah. Forget all that.
The other thing that I really like about new shooters, and this is something that I think even experienced shooters, they can get themselves in the right mindset. You just have to, it's another one of those sort of like unlearning things, or it's just a matter of kind of admitting to yourself that you don't necessarily know everything. And I'm not saying that because like usually people, oh, you think you know everything. It's like an insult. Like I've been there before. But one thing I really like about when you train new shooters is that, let's say you hand them a pistol, and we've confirmed the pistol's sighted in.
Mm-hmm.
Bang, 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 bang. The rounds are going low and left of the bullseye or something like that. That new shooter is willing to accept the fact, and they're almost assuming the fact that the reason I'm not hitting the bullseye is because I am doing something to influence the gun that's making it point low and left or high and right, or who knows where it's pointing, but it's not hitting the bullseye, right?
Yep.
And so then they're willing to take the feedback from an instructor to say, well, hey, let's change this, let's change that, let's have you do some other things. The last thing on their mind is, well, the gun's not working right, or the optic's not working right. Whereas a lot of times you get experienced shooters, and I think it's just because they come in with maybe just a different sense for their abilities than is reality, and they boom, 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 boom. I'm not hitting the bullseye. Something must be wrong with the equipment, and that's where the first instinct goes. Whereas I think it's important for people to actually at first, especially when you're a beginner, but really just all the time, think of yourself first. If ever you experience something that's not working the way that you thought it would. Because, those guns, especially if you haven't tinkered around with them a whole lot, like...
They're fine.
The manufacturer's building a couple bazillion of those things, and they're doing it the same way every time with machines, and all this, like... It's fine. The optic is really the same way, and as long as you put said optic and said gun together properly, which is a fairly, low variable process...
Right.
You are the one with an infinite amount of abilities. I mean, how many muscles are in the hand? Just the hand alone, there's like 60 or something like that muscles. Yep. Everything else going on, your eye, the way your brain is perceiving everything. Like, let's talk about all that first.
Exactly.
And be open to the fact that there may be something wrong in everything, one thing in all the stuff we're doing.
Anytime you have to learn something, it's going to take a significant degree of humility, because you're having to admit that you don't know something, and I have to go to somebody who does know that so they can impart that knowledge to me, right? So I'm admitting that you know more than me, right? Please help me learn. And I see this particularly in the very to stereotype these guys, very red-blooded American males. They have this innate ego in them that makes them think that they know how to shoot guns and drive trucks and build fires better than everybody else, right? And so that ego can really play into learning something. And man, if you can develop an amount of humility to say, hey, I don't know what I don't know. And there's no shame in learning from somebody who does know more than me so that I can maybe get to that level. I mean, man, if you can come into a training environment like that, you're really setting yourself up for success.
Right.
For sure. Like you said, I mean, check your ego at the door.
Yep.
If that's possible. And Jim, I'm not looking at it. But
there's nothing wrong with walking around thinking you can build fires and drive trucks and shoot guns. However, when you're trying to learn something, just be open to the fact that that maybe somebody else can do it better than you can, and maybe they actually care about you enough to want to teach you how to do it too.
Yeah, the more you're like, I got this, I know this, you're just being resistant to any of that knowledge.
And that's
coming in.
We can talk about this too, but like when you seek out a good firearms trainer, like if you can talk to them ahead of time, and if they seem like the kind of person who really is sort of like, I'm here to show you how cool I am, and maybe some of my goodness can rub off on you, then it's like, don't go to that person. It's okay to just, even if they are, like an Army Ranger SEAL. Like you can,
very strong credentials there, Jim.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Find somebody who's actually like, my resume isn't why you're coming to take a class with me. You're coming to take a class with me because I actually care enough about you as an American, and like somebody who can own a firearm to actually try and make you better at it.
Yeah, we're just gonna do the shooting thing. That's what we're gonna do. We're not gonna just tell stories.
Yeah.
For you to be impressed with how cool I am.
What about so a person is like, I want a concealed carry.
Okay.
Maybe they've gone through a training course, right?
Okay.
Like let's say
for them.
They took
Good
one
for
of the
them.
fantastic classes at Vortex Edge, and they're like, okay, now I'm gonna put my pistol in my holster, which even that on of itself, like you probably went through some of that in your training, but like that's like a new feeling. You're like, I've got this thing on me, it can go bang. If you're carrying appendix carry, which I think is what a lot of folks recommend these days, that's an interesting feeling. If you don't know what an appendix carry is, look it up. But
we can call it's the crotch carry.
Yeah.
Crotch optics.
And legitimately a question, because I don't know. Should a person get used to carrying, like, should step one be carrying that pistol empty, or would that be considered like a liability? Because you're like, I'm just trying to get familiar with it, but now you actually have a gun, but it's useless because it's empty, which could maybe create its own set of scenarios. Like, I don't know.
Right. So I would say yes, but I would do that in the relative safety of your own home.
Okay.
So I would carry that thing in that new holster, that new gun, new holster, trying to figure that out. Carry it as much as you can. Like, don't take it off until you go to bed type thing. And figure out how it is to wear it all day. Go just like sit in your car, get in and out of things, sit at your office chair, sit down to eat, different activities that you might find yourself doing. Use the restroom, 100%. Yeah.
I noticed, in our restrooms at Edge, like as you leave, there's a big sign that says, "Do you have your gun?"
Yeah, we also have the gun shelves too.
Yes.
It looks like a beer shelf if you're in a bar, but in a range, it's a gun
well,
shelf.
And I imagine too, like different types of clothes too. Like, is it summertime? Is it wintertime?
That's a great way to kind of dial in your concealment of, hey, my current setup is not working for the type of clothes that I wear. It's like, oh, well, do I have to make a wardrobe change, or do I need to make a concealment change? Right. So maybe I need a different holster. Maybe I need to look into a different belt option. Maybe I need to look into a different gun option. That's usually not the problem. Usually people have not explored the options that they have for fine-tuning their concealment, which, again, could probably be a whole podcast in and of itself. Yeah. But, like, I will, every day that I get dressed, and honestly, I wear mostly the same thing every day now. But every time I get dressed, I will check my concealment in the mirror.
We've really simplified your life around here.
Really simple. I wear this shirt like every single day.
A real Steve Jobs-esque wardrobe.
Yeah.
He's got there.
Yeah.
Brendan, we completely forgot to talk about things to get pretty quickly. Belt. You mentioned a belt. If you're going to conceal carry.
Yes.
Don't go about like wearing your Hollister, like old school, like pull it tight cloth belt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
No
I
bueno.
always recommend because of the way holsters are designed, right? They have holster clips that clip onto a belt, right? So for our YouTube viewers,
Here
we can maybe show an example, right? So
Brendan, I noticed that you're not carrying a incredibly tiny palm-sized pistol.
You're totally.
Oh wow,
You're getting ahead of me, Jim.
wow. Let's talk about holster clips and belts for a second.
Sorry, Mark. It seemed like an applicable time.
Well,
to bring it up.
it did. I mean,
it's not small. It's not small, right? But so one thing is, especially if you are going to carry a gun that is not tiny, this kind of weighs a lot, right? And so we need something that's going to support that. We need something that these clips can attach to really easily, and they're not going to come off of, right? And so these have these incredibly aggressive underhooks, and those actually clip in under the belt. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really aggressive underhooks, and that actually clips in under the belt. And so once this is on my belt and attached, it's not coming off, right? So there's no way this holster is coming off of my body unless I specifically take it off. And so I want a belt that's going to stand up to that. Right, I want a belt that's pretty sturdy. Generally, scuba webbing type belt with a layer of plastic or Kydex or something in the middle of it is going to be a real stiff option. I know you wear a leather version of that, but it's multiple layers, and I think it also has a Kydex inner, or maybe it's not Kydex, but it's something, sort of plastic.
Something
in it, right?
yeah, I gotta because. For me, it was like, all right, I want to wear a belt that doesn't feel, every time I go up, if I'm in a public place and I got to go to the, use the restroom and there's like 3 other people in there, I don't want to go like with all my hook and loop Velcro when I try to use the bathroom, or I don't want to be fighting around with this. So I found a belt that was really normal looking. It's from Hank's Belts.
Yep.
It's a leather belt. It looks like a normal leather belt, but man, is it like, it's a thick boy, and it doesn't
very stiff,
bend at all.
Rigid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's also going to help because if you're just wearing your regular leather favorite belt that you wear every day, that doesn't have enough rigidity around, right? And so it sags and bends with you, which actually makes it pretty comfortable to wear. But then when you add a heavy pistol, a fully loaded pistol in there, now we get an extra amount of sag, and now that gun is just kind of hanging on for dear life, if you will. And that's going to make for a lot of inconsistencies in your draw stroke. It's going to make it harder to conceal because that belt, it does not provide enough pressure to keep that gun close into your body.
You print a little bit more in your shirt.
You'll print a little bit more, which is being able to see the gun through your shirt.
Well, imagine,
so there's a lot of pros to wearing a stiff belt that will support the holster and the gun that you're choosing to carry.
And I'd imagine during the draw, the point is you want the holster to stay put
in the same place,
in the same spot, and the pistol to be removed from the holster.
You got one of those
for
floppy
use.
belts, and you're like pulling your whole pants like up
Right,
to your
you're like,
chest, and you're like, get out of there!
All right, it's out.
I've seen people do that, and I've also seen people go to draw their pistol, and their holster comes out with it, and they're pointing a holstered gun at somebody or at a target. I've seen it happen multiple times.
Yeah.
So that's a gear thing that you can spend money to fix, right? So that's one of the places where, man, if I do throw money at higher quality products, well-designed products, that is actually going to buy me a lot of benefit.
Yeah.
It's not going to make you better shooting, but again, it's going to set you up for success, which is kind of the goal.
Yeah. And it is so nice that now they make some belts that look like normal people belts that are also like good for carrying stuff.
Yes, definitely.
Now we got sidetracked because we had to bring up belts. I'm glad we brought it up because it's very important. I can't remember what time. We were talking about training and stuff still.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I've got a couple questions in relation to training.
Fire away.
What can a person learn from the internet? And then conversely, what should they be maybe careful of learning from the internet? Or what types
that's a
of...
fantastic question.
Careful, Brennan. You don't want to get yourself...
I'm not asking to name names or anything like that. Actually, I don't even have any names in mind, so I'm not like insinuating anything. But yeah, there's so much information out there.
Yes.
How does a person sift through all that information and kind of know that they're getting the good stuff that they want?
Brennan's the right man to answer this question. He's savvy on the internet, and he's on the social media.
Ooh, geez.
On it.
He's on
the socials.
He has a social networking page.
So that's a really good question. That's a really good question, and there's a lot of nuance to it. I think the best thing that you can do, first of all, is finding someone who's perhaps local to you who can get you started in the right direction. So if you can find somebody who's going to set you up for success, help you maybe with holster selection and different things, or maybe you find some sort of resource from a very reputable place, maybe like Vortex Edge. Figuring out kind of a baseline, and then from there, looking at other different options. YouTube is a great resource for learning. However, there's a lot of wannabe, I call them YouTube instructors or Instagram instructors, who are maybe getting paid by a company to represent a product that they're just getting paid for it, and maybe they haven't really used it. Maybe they don't really put it through its paces. So I always try to find shooters who are using gear who can give me feedback on that gear, and then also looking for training tips from people who obviously shoot very well. Mm-hmm. And so I will try to find maybe a shooter or an instructor who maybe posts a lot of videos of them shooting. Right, and they're showing their shot timer, and they're showing their hits on the target, and they're talking through, here's how I was doing that, and here's how you can practice this. And when they're putting their skill set out there for the entire internet to fry and to really dissect, that takes a lot of vulnerability, and it also displays a certain level of confidence and competence in what they're actually teaching.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the picture's worth 1,000 words too. You're like, yeah,
definitely.
He did that, or that person did that.
He did it, right, exactly. And so especially the one-take style videos where it's not just a flashy, really well-edited kind of movie-like video, but just them on the range. Hey, here's me shooting. Here's the time that I did it in. Here's my hits. Let's do it again. And the camera's rolling the whole time. Man, that's pretty hard to argue with, right?
Yeah. And like you said, being able to articulate the how and the why.
Exactly. And if I'm listening to him talk, and what he's saying about what he just did is making sense to me, like my common sense is telling me, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, then that gives me a pretty good indication that he's not just full of baloney. Yeah. Right? He's going to be somebody who is actually explaining things, and I'm like, that makes sense. I would like to be there in person to learn from this person. Yeah. If it's somebody who never explains themselves, or can't explain themselves, or don't prove on video that they're actually good at shooting, or don't have any videos of them shooting at all, that's somebody that I would probably not just go sign up for a class for.
What if they had a lot of followers?
That doesn't matter.
I don't know, but Brennan, like, when he says a lot of followers, we're talking like a lot. No, that is you gotta do your due diligence with whoever you learn from. I mean, a lot of times people, they look at movies and they're like, oh, it's a movie, it's unrealistic. But then they go on YouTube and they're watching something and just eating it up, and you're like, well, you know. A lot of times if you're trying to learn something and somebody's trying to teach something, there's a lot of things in life, like shooting training, for an example, that aren't always super sexy. And people who are trying to get a lot of followers and views on YouTube and stuff, they know that usually it's like the sexy stuff that really gets all that. Mm-hmm. So if you're watching somebody and they're like, hey, yeah, here's, the basics on how to shoot a pistol, and they're doing like barrel rolls and like just all these crazy, like, yeah, we're running over here and stuff, it's, I don't know. You got to kind of take that with a grain of salt, because you're like, it seems to me more like this person's more focused on like how cool this looks.
Yeah, definitely. And in an age of just scrolling on your phone, you have about like a second or 2 seconds tops to get my attention. Man, if it's just a dude talking, like, whoosh, I'm going to scroll right by probably, right? If I'm just looking for entertainment or entertainment, right? People...
I'm going to write that one down.
People who are actually talking about shooting and demoing it at a high level, that's something that stops me, because I'm like, hey, I would like to be able to do that. Yeah. And so if he's giving me some sort of insight into how he did it, then I'm going to listen up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So you can. I know people who are entirely self-taught, right, from the internet, from watching people shoot, and you can learn a lot that way. But just keep in mind there's going to be a lot of stuff you're going to have to kind of sift through, and you're going to have to take most things with a grain of salt, and you have to kind of filter it through just kind of that common sense indicator that you have of like, does that actually make sense? And if it's something that seems like it's very proprietary and he's trying to teach some big secret to shooting, man, that sounds like it's probably something that he's doing maybe for just the likes or the follows.
Yeah, I think, within the context of this podcast of so you bought a pistol, now what, right? I mean, this is like your first foray into this world, and frankly, what, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what a person should be looking to learn and should be learning. I mean, it's not the quotation mark sexiest of things. Like, it's not going to be super wild barrel rolls. It's like learning how to operate your firearm, learning how to be safe with your firearm, which is also part of, learning how to operate, and getting those fundamentals down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you go to instructor and you didn't get better at shooting, then that's a pretty good indication that instructor probably maybe doesn't have as much to offer as somebody else. And so I'll put this out there because I stand by it. If you come to Vortex Edge and train with us, you will learn something, okay? Because we spend a lot of one-on-one time with people in classes. You will learn something. And if that's what it takes to validate, even listening to me talk on podcasts, like maybe that's what you need to do, right? To figure out, hey, this person actually knows what they're talking about. They can actually help me get better at something that I want to get better at.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for going out and validating it yourself. But like I said, an instructor who's claiming to be able to teach you needs to be able to teach you. They need to be confident. They need to be able to explain it. They need to be able to pass that information on to you, diagnose the issues you're having, all that, right? So definitely you can find it on Instagram, on YouTube. There's a lot of good content out there, but just because they have a certain follower count or a certain number of likes per post does not equate to the value that you might actually get as far as like real training.
One thing I'll throw out there, and then Brennan, chime in on this too with your thoughts, but so I think people also have to kind of like understand the fact or be okay with the fact that if you bought this pistol and you want to, I think you should have realistic expectations about what it is that you actually really want to be able to achieve with the pistol.
Sure.
So a lot of people are going to try and tell you that you need to be, shooting thousands of rounds and you need to be able to achieve XYZ benchmarks of time or these certain performance stats, and you need to you got to get into competition and shoot, 10 matches a year and do all this stuff. I don't think that's for everyone. And I don't think in order to be a responsible pistol owner that you have to go all in. I think it's perfectly okay to own a firearm, and I think you can achieve a level of responsibility that allows you to use it defensively, responsibly in a way that's not reckless or anything. And it doesn't have to be like your thing,
100%.
Like, everybody has to be realistic with that because you only have so many hours in a day.
Absolutely.
And people are going to get a pistol who, their thing is, I play the piano, I work on cars, I go hunting a lot, I do whatever else, I just have kids and all this other stuff going on. You don't have to make your whole life all about that pistol and shooting it.
Definitely not. And I think that while it would be probably beneficial when you do buy that first pistol to jump in and maybe spend more than the normal amount of time on learning things, right? Just because it's new and there's a lot to take in.
Sure.
While that is probably the most ideal thing, like you said, it's not for everyone. Not everyone is going to make it their life. Not everyone is going to dedicate hours per day to learning this stuff and perfecting the craft. What I always tell people, I think the most important thing for someone who's carrying a firearm for defensive purposes is you have to know your capabilities and also your limitations with that firearm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so if I know for a fact that I am not very accurate past 10 yards, then when I'm carrying a pistol defensively and there's perhaps a threat that needs to be dealt with at 20 yards, and there are people next to that person, and there's a chance for collateral damage, I need to know that that's probably not a shot that I should be taking.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And let's be honest, a situation under stress, people don't exactly get better.
No. Yeah, definitely not.
Normally I can't hit the broadside of a barn at 20 yards, but now I'm stressed and there's a guy who wants to kill me at 20 yards away. I bet I'll have just an absolute perfection accuracy. That doesn't occur.
Yeah, no way, no how, right? So I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And that's what training is going to show you, though. Maybe you are really good at 20 yards or something like that, and you say, hey, that is a shot that I can take. Mm-hmm. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I can make that shot. I'm not going to miss. I'm capable of doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm capable of getting my gun out of my holster it takes me 2 seconds to do that, right? Or maybe it takes me 1 second to do that. And so you have to be the judge of that. Do I have a full 2 seconds of time here? Or is that guy going to turn around before that time is up? And so maybe that's a time when, man, that gun needs to stay concealed, stay in the holster, and you're going to deal with a problem a different way. And so I think that's the most important thing for people. You don't have to be a grandmaster level pistol shooter to carry concealed and be able to defend your life. And sometimes that's the only option you have. And so, man, it's going to fall back on your level of training, what level of training you've trained to. But just know what you're capable of and know what you're not capable of. And I think that's going to keep you out of a lot of potentially dicey situations.
Right. One other thing, Mark, and I'll throw this one out there. So we haven't hit on it a whole lot yet, but I think it's, probably, it's up there for importance. You're buying this pistol for defensive use. Understand legalities.
Absolutely.
Of actually employing it in, as deadly force. That's what it is. And it's deadly force whether you shoot him in the leg or not. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But we spend a lot of time in the classes that we do. We have a class that's dedicated to home defense. We have a class called Everyday Ready, which is sort of like it's very similar in a lot of aspects, but it focuses on outside the home. You could call it a concealed carry class, but it's not like to
get your permit. It's a shooting course.
It's actually a shooting course,
right? Yep.
A great deal of time in that is spent on understanding the legalities of the employment of deadly force in defense of yourself or loved ones or whatever. And I think a lot of people, and you can have your opinions on this, whatever, but a lot of people think it's America. I have a gun. If this person is a threat, I can mow them down. I'm just going to blast. Someone's in my house, they're dead. Whatever. And it's more complicated than that. We've
seen that all over the news recently, right? We're in Wisconsin. We had that whole thing going on, and it seemed very cut and dry to a lot of people, and there were a lot of people who were like, no, right? This person needs to go to prison for life, right? And so it's not sexy. It's not honestly very fun, but you have to know the laws in your state. You have to know what scenarios where you'd be authorized to use deadly force, and you have to know that, and that just has to be part of your character. Honestly, you have to know exactly when you can use your gun and when you can't.
Yeah.
And especially today.
Yeah.
Especially today.
Like we have in Wisconsin, we have the Castle Doctrine.
Yep.
And that one I think gets misinterpreted at times as somebody steps foot in my house, I have carte blanche to just go absolutely, annihilate the threat. Whatever. I can just go and just do whatever I want. Or there's other things like that. And you should know, there are a lot of freedoms that we are afforded in this country, and it also varies state to state.
I was going to say,
with how you can defend yourself. There's a lot of privileges there that you have as a law-abiding, responsible citizen.
Yep.
And ultimately, really, if you follow the law, you're never going to be in a situation where boy, I wish I could defend my life, but I can't right now because of law. If you're following it and you know it, you should never run into that issue. But I think if you don't know that and you kind of go in with just this, I've got a gun, I can do whatever I want, you could be the one going to jail.
Yep.
And who's really going to be defending yourself or your family when you're in jail?
Exactly. When you're, one of my favorite sayings, I tell people this at a lot of the conclusion of a lot of classes. I say, look, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But not everything needs a hammer, right? And not everything is a nail that needs a hammer. So like, you have to have a high level of discretion and common sense and just a solid head on your shoulders. This is not the Wild West. Right? So yeah, it's great consideration.
I mean, there's so much to think about and so much to know when it comes to that aspect of carrying. And probably, we almost could have even started there, because I'd say that's getting that foundation is probably one of, if not the most important things. Like,
definitely
know what you can and cannot do. And the why behind it.
You may even decide that carrying a firearm is not for you.
Yeah, you might.
And if you do, if you've actually gone through all that stuff and you've reached the point where you decide, hey, carrying a firearm in public is not for me, I actually think that is probably that's a far more responsible decision than being like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to have a gun on me. I'm strapped.
That's definitely the more responsible way to go.
Yeah.
And some people, they say, hey, I bought a firearm, but I really don't have time to train with it. I'm not very good with it. I shoot it maybe once a year, so I don't really feel comfortable carrying it. My hat's off to you for understanding that about yourself.
Yeah.
And what you do on the last ditch moment where you need to defend yourself, maybe at your home or something, that's on you, right? But man, you've made the decision not to carry that out in public and perhaps endanger other people. Maybe you feel, like you're more of a liability than an asset. Then man, I respect that a lot. And
that doesn't mean that you're going to be like a soft target.
No.
Having a pistol on you does not make you instantly make you a soft target. Like you can still be, absolutely okay in a lot of situations, even without a pistol.
Yeah, having the awareness of what's going on around you, keeping, like I said, keeping your head screwed on straight and avoiding stupid places with stupid people at stupid times, right? That's gonna be the number one thing. Avoid those situations where you might need a pistol.
Right. That's step one if you're carrying a pistol too.
Exactly. I mean,
those things are the same.
Just because you have a pistol, like, doesn't give you the, just this thing where you now like, oh yeah, I'll walk down that street at 11 at night on, a Saturday night, whatever, all by myself. It's like, dude, why? Don't bring it upon yourself.
Exactly.
I mean, in some ways, having the pistol could be more of a reason not to be there, but I don't know.
Definitely. Like, I don't want to put myself in a situation where it's more likely that I would need to defend my life with a pistol, even if it's perfectly justified.
Because you don't want to be the next guy on TV for weeks and weeks and weeks, having to defend something that was,
exactly,
like you said, it's cut and dry. But now everybody's just like wants to burn you at the stake.
Well,
exactly.
I mean, you could be 10,000% in the right.
Yep.
And that's the outcome of, whatever, at the end of the day, that's the outcome, right? Yep. This guy was totally justified, did the right thing, bing, bing, boom. You're still probably going to be on TV.
Yep.
And you're still going to be judged by the public.
If that thing happens, you still had to shoot somebody. I mean,
and you
only messed up people, I think. Well, I shouldn't say that. No. Hold on. Because, I don't want to get into the whole thing where it's like there's people who go into the military and they go into the military to defend other people, and then they're in that they know what they're going to get. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's really messy.
Well, yeah, that gets really messy. But, if you get a pistol because you're like, boy, I really hope I get to shoot somebody.
Yeah, nope.
That's weird.
Nope.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Usually I'd say, we shouldn't just judge people, Jim, but that's probably pretty right.
Yeah.
You definitely
don't read in too much to how I worded that, by the way. I hope people understand what I was trying to get at there. Like, you don't buy a pistol so you're like, boy, oh boy, this is good,
This is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't buy a pistol to become a vigilante. Right?
Yeah.
It's a last ditch effort to protect your life or your loved ones' lives. And if you want to fight crime, that's a different job.
It
Right.
is. Yes.
It's a different job.
And there are jobs out there for
There
that.
are jobs out there for that, and we need more of them. But
Yes.
man, as just a private, responsibly armed citizen, that's not our main goal, right? The main goal is to get home every night and to be safe and to keep our family safe.
Yep. What
Yeah.
he said.
Like Mark said, I mean, I wish we would have brought that up immediately, but it's a very important point. And again, hey, you bought this pistol and you're going through everything and you decide it's not for me. It doesn't mean that the pistol's pointless, because there's all kinds of other. You can go out, you can enjoy it recreationally. If it just is a home defense pistol, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you're just more comfortable using it in that regard, where all the circumstances of, like, I am in my home. This person is an intruder to my home. I do not, maybe it's more cut and dry in that situation than being out in public. There's competition you can get into.
It's just
There's
as
all
much
kinds of
you're
stuff, like-
in your Second Amendment right to be able to own a firearm and use it for recreational use, to carry it in a professional capacity, or to carry it concealed, or to have it for home defense.
Or heck,
right?
I don't know, to collect.
Exactly. Like,
Whatever.
you can do whatever.
Oh.
Like, it's America, right? So you can own
Like
guns
as
and
part
do whatever.
of a collection, not as like I came to collect.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mark. As part of a collect.
A
Yeah.
firearms collection.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah. Right.
Just to be an enthusiast about.
But there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's completely
Same.
a personal choice.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with you doing that as long as you know that, hey, that's the thing that I do. I collect firearms. I just buy a bunch of them. I think that's cool, and they all sit in a big metal box in my garage. Like, cool. Like, if that's your thing, awesome. Right? If your thing is to carry that every day, then there's responsibilities that go along with that. And that's awesome. I'm glad that you're doing that. If you just want to shoot competition, man, that's a heck of a lot of fun, and that's awesome that you do that, right?
Right. Because we all know as soon as you start being like, well, no, you shouldn't be able to do that, it's like, well, hey, man, why are we all of a sudden drawing lines here? Where do you stop drawing lines?
Right.
Cool. Mark, did you have anything else that we missed?
Man, I think we hit on everything. I guess the one thing maybe to circle back to a little bit was, and I know we're saying, hey, you already have the gun, now what? But when you pulled your personal pistol out, like, that's definitely appears to be a full-size pistol.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that you were carrying it. I think sometimes people get a mindset of like, oh, it's going to be concealed carry, so
it needs to be this big,
right?
Like the size of a Pez dispenser.
Like, yeah, like, oh, I can put it right here in my shirt pocket, and off we go. So I guess what would be some of your recommendations there? And I know we're kind of like, maybe this person is past that, but maybe at this point it's also something they can rethink.
Hey, maybe you bought the wrong pistol. Now go and trade it.
Right. You bought the wrong pistol. Now what?
Yeah, part two, right? No, so I would say, so instead of just giving recommendations, right, I'm maybe just going to provide some more general guidelines.
I like that.
So if you are only going to have this pistol for home defense, and you are never going to carry it on you, it doesn't really matter what size it is. I'm going to recommend a larger framed handgun because that's easier to shoot than a smaller framed handgun in the same caliber. Okay, there's more frame, there's more weight to soak up the recoil. Man, it's just a lot more pleasant to shoot. More to hold on to. It's in a lot of ways it's safer because it's less likely that you might muzzle yourself or something like that. So if you're never ever going to carry it, it's just going to be a dedicated home defense gun or dedicated range gun. It doesn't matter what size it is. I would get one of the larger sized guns that is comfortable to shoot for you. When it comes to concealed carry, right? If I limit myself to a tiny little gun with 6 rounds in it, then again that comes back to knowing my capabilities and limitations. I know that I only have enough ammunition to deal with a certain amount of problems, right? Because I only have 6 rounds. If I'm carrying a gun like this and I have 18 rounds on board, then I know my capacity to deal with potential problems is maybe a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Right. If I'm carrying a larger frame firearm that I have trained with a lot, I know that I can be fast and accurate with this gun. Then again, that also increases that capability for me, and decreases my limitation. So I like to tell people, especially as you gain more confidence and competence with your pistol, I try to carry the biggest handgun that I can comfortably conceal.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, it's because when I have to use it, now I'm using a gun that I'm very familiar with, that's easy to shoot, and I would like the shooting part to be as easy as possible when I'm under that horrible stress on that really bad day.
Yep.
Right.
And by easier to shoot, like there's more mass to like,
More
you know,
mass. Yep.
this full size one versus, you know, maybe something like you said of the same caliber, but much smaller that might be a little bit more poppy, might be a little bit harder to hold. Like you said, you might be prone to muzzling yourself. I mean, there's kind of and then there's also people that can shoot that same gun that I'm describing like very competently. So I'm not going to say like, oh, you never do that, right?
But those people who can shoot those small guns very competently, I would venture to guess they probably learned on bigger guns, and they spend a lot of time training with that small gun because they know that they do carry it, and they want to be really competent with it. And so if you have a lot of time to dedicate to shooting a gun that's quite a bit harder to shoot, then good on you, man. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. So I'm going to carry a larger gun that I shoot with a lot, and that's what I'm most comfortable with carrying because, man, I'm super familiar with it.
Cool. I like it.
Sweet. Well, if you are somebody out there who has just gotten a pistol and you're wondering now what, let us know if what we talked about here helped or if there's any questions that remain unanswered at this point. Yeah, or if you're somebody who's still in the point where you haven't gotten the pistol, but you're still wondering now what. Same thing. But Brennan, thanks a ton.
Absolutely, guys, it was a pleasure.
Don't forget to check out. I mean, we've been plugging it here on and off throughout the whole podcast. You are listening to a Vortex podcast, so that's going to happen from time to time. But Vortex Edge, we've got classes for you. If you are somebody who is newer, like this person we've been talking to, honestly, though, even if you're somebody who has been, shooting for a long time, but it's been kind of in an unorganized form where it's just kind of been, hey, for fun out, in the backyard, if you got a giant backyard, or out on the farm, or who knows what. Come and take one of our intro to pistol classes. We actually do a lot of shooting. We go over a lot of stuff. There's a lot of one-on-one instructor time. And from there, if you're really feeling it, you want to just keep going and shooting a bunch more pistol, then we got a whole pipeline, part of our total shooter program. And we also have some of those specialty classes that are really cool too. Like we mentioned, the home defense, everyday ready. We've got intro to USPSA if you want to shoot some competition, that good stuff.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Nailed it.
All right. Well,
thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Brennan.
Absolutely, guys.
And
bye.
Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.